Chapter 568. I have placed the items the Duke requested under that desk over there. You're the only one who can understand his intentions after examining them. So take a look and make your judgment. Edith rose from his seat and walked towards the area indicated. Indeed, there were stacks of books and papers hidden in a place unlikely to catch anyone's eye. Surveying them, Edith noted that each item emitted a stale, half-rotten smell. He picked up a few of the closest books. The text was in an ancient language he barely understood, but fortunately, the titles also had small translations in the modern script, making them easy enough to understand. The age of the first chapter of the Holy Book. How did divine power resurrect a tenfold torn limb? Taboo experiments with divine power. Magic that transcends death. Evidence and examination, human subjects. Human time and divine time. Methodical magic for the perfect preservation of life and death. At first glance, it seemed as if the topics were randomly selected, but that couldn't possibly be true. The person who had ordered these books must have had a clear reason for choosing them. Either set them back down and quickly skimmed through the titles of other books and papers. Aside from a few that had no titles, most were on similar themes: healing, death, protection, and time. Either muttered, naming the recurring terms. Time was a subject I mentioned in Duke Tain's experimental diary that caught my attention, but the rest are books that seem to explore taboo methods for absolute protection or escaping from death through potent healing were the majority. There was only one conclusion to be drawn from this. It seemed as though Kishir was not seeking to understand why Yudhir appeared as a condemned man in his dream. Rather, he was looking for a way to prevent such an event from ever happening again, or a solution if it did. He was even willing to peruse these dangerous books to find it. Yudhir picked up the book, Methodical Magic for the Perfect Preservation of Life and Death, once more. It was one of the few whose title was not written in ancient text. The title sounded reasonable, and he thought the content would be easy to read. Surprisingly, the book was filled with more illustrations than text, all of which was absurdly cruel and gruesome. Yudhir frowned involuntarily as he skimmed through the horrific images. Whoever wrote this book had an unscrupulous mind. No sane person could glean anything from it. The only ones who might be were psychopathic killers or equally deranged mages who wrote books like this for the sake of pleasure. Without uttering a word, Yudhir slammed the book shut and tossed it aside harshly. Some of the books here might not be forbidden texts, but this one definitely is. It's clear why it was banned. He had only skimmed one, but his desire to investigate further had entirely vanished. Yudhir took a long, deep breath to calm his emotions. At the very least, it was clear that Kishir Lahore had a certain level of determination in seeking answers about the recent dream. It was undeniable that he was keeping all possibilities open without any limitations. In search of an answer solely for Yudhir's sake, a heavy sense of resolve weighed down on his shoulders. Unconsciously, Yudhir closed his eyes. I can hear the carriage approaching. It seems they have returned. Nathan Zuckerman broke the silence, as if he had been waiting for Yudhir to absorb all he could from the books. Though Yudhir heard nothing, he trusted the Swordmaster's keen senses, far beyond that of an ordinary man. Kishir, who had left for the Grand Temple, would return soon. Yudhir returned the book to its original place on the shelf. Thank you for your counsel, Sir Zuckerman. Have you made your decision? I had intended to discuss something with the commander upon his return regardless, but without having seen these books, I would have had difficulty confirming the rightness of my coming here. Whether he read the books or not, Yudhir's intended course of action wouldn't have changed, but knowing he hadn't arrived too late brought a different sense of relief. So, if there is nothing pressing on your end, Sir Zuckerman, could you return later? Sir Zuckerman's gaze met Yudhir's. The faithful knight rose silently, bowing his head before departing. Very well. Left alone, Yudhir looked around the commander's office. The room, arranged according to the Kishir's taste, was a place both were intimately familiar with, having spent countless hours together. Closing his eyes, Yudhir could vividly recall every object's location. Following his trail of memories, he stopped in front of an ornately curved drawer. As he opened the first compartment, an organized array of items caught his eye. Without hesitation, Yudhir picked up one and headed for the table. Well, Commander, we shall take our leave now. The door opened and in came the voice of Stryber Renly, the deputy commander of Sul Division, who was unable to conceal his excitement. The tall man who had come in halted his steps upon spotting the shadow seated behind the coal stove. You're here. I felt someone was watching, but naturally assumed it was Nathan. Unfortunately, it's me, Yudhir responded, emotionless. Kishir, in the process of removing his outer garment, smiled faintly. Unfortunate? This is more like an unexpected stroke of luck, isn't it? It was the first time they had seen each other and the first conversation they had since yesterday. Although it felt strangely like meeting after a long absence, everything also flowed seamlessly, as if nothing had ever happened. I heard you went to the Grand Temple, summoned by the Pope, I believe? Yes, he wanted to meet the new master of the Divine Sword personally. And what did he say? He said he was pleased to meet the new master of the Divine Sword before departing for God's side. That's surprisingly straightforward approval. Others might not have been so pleased. The current Pope was extremely old and not one to explicitly express his political opinions. To put it kindly, he was a quiet and devout man. Otherwise, one could say he maintained a neutral stance, refraining from intervening in any conflict. The meeting was supposed to be a private one, but oddly enough, word got around and many people insisted on joining. It made it easier for me to prove that I am indeed the master of the Divine Sword. All I had to do was unseat it in front of the host of witnesses. Yudhir immediately grasped the implications behind the words. So the papal side intended to keep today's meeting highly confidential. However, thanks to some fortuitous rumors, they had no choice but to acknowledge it after seeing him draw the Divine Sword in front of everyone, he thought. The source of those fortuitous rumors was not hard to guess. It must be a collaboration between the Emperor and Kishir, Yudhir concluded. If the Pope and his close associates knew this, it might have stayed a rumor. But others had witnessed it too, dispelling any notion that it was merely hearsay. Kishir had walked the path he was meant to take, looking remarkably relaxed, as if he couldn't possibly be bolstered by sedatives and headache medicine. What's the reason you have waited for me this far? And what's this about a tactical game board? Kishir inquired. The man who unsheathed the sword and placed it on top of the magic stone stove approached Yudhir. His shadow flickered, growing larger and smaller, as if danced in front of a multicolored flame of the magic stone stove. I have something to discuss with you, Commander, but this caught my eye, Yudhir replied. It wasn't exactly placed conspicuously, the man retorted. It caught my eye nevertheless, Yudhir insisted. Yudhir tapped the tactical game board and pieces that had taken from Kishir's drawer. Kishir's eyes momentarily narrowed as he observed the board perfectly arranged according to the rules they followed when playing the game. You said you learned a little as a child, but you seem rather well acquainted with it, Kishir observed. It's not a lie, Yudhir confirmed. By Yudhir's standards, considering it was a game he had learned 10 years ago in his previous life, stating it as a childhood memory wasn't wrong. He hadn't enjoyed the game since Kishir's passing, so in a way, he had only learned it for its cultural significance. Kishi reached for a game piece representing a lord that was closest to him. As he did, an old imperial adage slipped from his lips. There is no tool like a tactical game for simplifying matters. In his previous life, Kishir had taught Yudhid the tactical game, uttering the same adage. It is said that Francius, the genius strategist during the era of Secret Emperor, always played a tactical game when discussing important matters. Sometimes playing a game can be helpful for an honest exchange. Of course, Yudhid hadn't agreed with this, promptly forgetting it shortly after hearing it. However, when he decided that today was the day for an important conversation, that saying was the first thing that came to mind. Alright, let's play after a long while, Yudhir agreed. Without asking further, Kishir took a seat opposite Yudhir. His golden hair, usually unpickably styled, now slightly disheveled and covering his forehead, captured Yudhir's attention. Yudhir picked up a black piece laid in front of him. Let's begin then, he announced.